Welcome to the Well Prepared Life podcast, where we dive into the fundamentals of readiness for life's challenges, covering topics from personal responsibility to mental and physical preparedness and beyond. Let's forge resilience, nurture growth, and embrace responsibility on the journey to the well prepared life. Hey, welcome to the Well Prepared Life podcast. This is our first episode. And so we're going to be kind of figuring this out as we go, but we're glad that you joined us. And just a little bit about myself. My name's Nathan. I am late 20s. I'm married for a few years. Actually got married pretty young at 21. And we just had our first kid. And so that's been really cool over the last few weeks, literally 6 weeks ago. And so it's been cool over the last few weeks, learning to live life with a baby. I've actually gotten decent sleep. We got our first 8 hours of sleep last night.
Oh, nice.
Which is wild. But that's not common, and it was broken up, but it was still a solid 8 hours. But yeah, so one of the things that I'm passionate about is personal responsibility, and I like the idea of preparedness and being ready for things. But a lot of people take that and they're like, oh, what's the physical thing? Especially if you've ever heard of the prepper community or whatever that is, where they want to be ready for the crazy things that happen. And I do care about those things. I want to be ready for them, but I want to look at this more holistically of being prepared for emotional challenges, family challenges, work challenges, the things that everybody experiences, and being ready to make it through those and not just barely get by, but to thrive in those situations.
Nice. And I'm Kyle. I recently got married at a little bit later in life, 30 years old. We haven't had our first anniversary yet, so still pretty newlywed. Still getting pretty good sleep, so I'm a little bit more rested than others here. But I'm still figuring out preparedness and kind of responsibilities and being, I guess, what's the word? Your own person accountable, holding yourself accountable kind of thing, driven, I guess is another adjective that I'm kind of seeking to be. And I think Nathan's got a good skill set here, and we kind of strengthen each other in that. We're still learning. He's a couple steps down the road further than I am, so I'm here to learn just as much as anybody else. And I'm excited for this journey. So, Nathan, you say it's a well-prepared life podcast. So what is a well-prepared life?
Yeah. So as kind of the intro, as you heard that, it says the well-prepared life is somebody who's resilient. They are, let me think of the words for this, but yeah, they're resilient. They want to grow, and they take responsibility for their life. And so they are people that when a problem comes up, they aren't they don't get totally destroyed by it or overcome. They might waver, and that's why we have community.
Right.
But they are people that they take challenges on and they overcome them.
Okay.
And so that's the first thing as far as the well-prepared life. Somebody that's resilient, wants to grow, and is really willing to take responsibility for their actions in their life.
Okay. Do you think anybody can be that person?
Yeah. So
is it a certain degree?
I think it comes easier for some people.
Okay.
If you've ever heard of the Enneagram, I don't give it too much credence, but it's helpful sometimes. Mm-hmm. I'm an Enneagram type 8, and that's the challenger. Nice. So it's the person who wants to dive in head first. So for people with my personality, that whole take responsibility and take control, that comes a little bit more easily for me. Mm-hmm. Other people, that's not as easy, but I do think that everybody has the ability to build resilience, to grow, and to take responsibility for their lives. Nice. And I don't think that is something that is limited to people who are maybe what you would say the bigger or stronger personalities. Okay. And I'm not saying that even as a healthy way. The stronger personalities are oh wow, that's a strong personality. I kind of had that in my past. I've grown a lot. But it's the people who seem to be more timid, but they really take responsibility for how they approach life. That would be just as much a well-prepared. It's somebody who lives the well-prepared life as somebody who it's oh wow, they're big and bold and they're making moves.
Nice. Okay.
So the well-prepared life happens in the big moments, but also in the very quiet moments.
Okay. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? The big moments and quiet moments,
you
said something about when you falter. Sometimes when you falter.
So a big moment, well-prepared life would be I'm making a big change in my life.
Okay.
And that would be I am starting a business. I am going out. I am starting a family. I would say is a big moment.
Yeah.
But the quiet moments are those things of I exercise every day.
Yeah.
Even when I don't want to. It's the people who say I'm a believer, and it's I read my Bible every day. Mm-hmm. And it's and I struggle with that, but it's the idea of I do things in the quiet where nobody knows, but I do it consistently.
That's good.
And it's those things where it's like, and I do this because I know it makes my life better. And that applies to a wide range of things. As far as like meditation, a lot of people do that in order to like set themselves and like to be resilient and ready for the things that the day is going to throw at them.
That's good.
I would say as far as the faltering part, I have a friend right now. I can't go into many details, but they got a lot going on. His wife just got hurt recently. His kids got some pretty like major medical issues, and he's somebody that I would call very resilient. And I'm like, but he still needs community. And so that's where it's like sometimes life throws things at us what we need help with. But the difference between somebody who is not living that well-prepared life is they're the person that when that happens, they just fall apart completely and they don't, and I don't mean that in the sense of like, you can't break down or you can't have emotion.
Sure. Yeah.
What I mean that is they just let everything, they like don't take care of themselves or people around them at all. And they don't allow people to take care of them. They lash out emotionally and like they lash out at others when they try to reach out and connect with them. So that would be like the person who's like a breakdown as far as they fall apart is like somebody who lashes out when people try to help and doesn't allow people to help. So not the person who's like, I'm distraught or I'm grieving, but the person who like will not allow anybody to help. And who, when something big happens, or even sometimes like I have friends that I've known, something seemingly small, like they got a bad grade on a paper and their whole week is ruined. And I'm like, that's not very resilient.
Yeah.
Like, and so it's like the idea of like somebody who can like take a hard news and be like, you know what, that's hard, but I'm going to keep moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. So you can feel emotions during this. Just don't let those emotions control you. Is that a good?
Yeah, that would be a good way of putting it.
Saying it. Yeah.
Because like that's one of the things that I have grown up with. Like I am not a big feeler. Not uncommon for a lot of men. And so, but one of the things I have grown a lot in probably about the last 5 years or so, is there's a period of time where we were doing something with some friends called a sharpening, where we just talked about the areas where we wanted to grow and then had an opportunity for people to speak into our lives, be like, hey, this is an area where I see that I think you can grow. And I see like, hey, maybe here's some ideas for how to do that. And one of the things that I realized is like, I don't let myself experience any emotion. And what that did is that found that it trapped me from getting either the high highs of like the excitement and the love and joy, but also had no low lows. So like that was the good part for me. I'm never sad. I'm never distraught, but I'm also never excited or happy.
Yeah.
I'm kind of riding right in the middle. And I found that that's not healthy.
Oh, interesting.
That's not a healthy place to be in.
Yeah.
Because we are meant to live lives that have joy.
Yeah.
And that part of that is that we will also have times when we are like having deep sadness. And that's good and healthy. And my emotional spectrum, if you would put it that way, for a 0 is like no emotion, and then you have high highs, low lows. Mine is going to be more narrow than somebody that tends to be more emotionally expressive.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that I need to be like, it's fine that I'm right in the middle.
Yeah.
Like there are things that like with my new like baby, I am overjoyed and I have so much happiness because of her.
Yeah.
And recognizing that like if she grows up and makes decisions that I don't approve of or don't like, then I'm going to have deep sadness.
Yeah.
And that's okay that I feel that way. And I'm still going to love her, still going to care for her. But recognizing that contrast, that it's like not one or the other. And I think like the goal to bring it back to the well-prepared life a little bit, my real thought is that this is holistic. It's not one thing or another thing. It's not like a specific, make sure you have enough food in case the power goes out for a couple weeks.
Right.
And it's not just like, hey, make sure you can like have a bad grade and not die.
Yeah.
But that it's holistic and it affects all of the areas of life.
So it's like a holistic doctor. If you have like a foot pain, but it's really something wrong with your back. Like it's something like that. It's the whole body is connected. Something like that.
Exactly.
Okay, that's interesting. So you said something about you had community and you sharpen each other. Can you do this well-prepared life on your own, or do you need community, or is it what's your thoughts on that?
Community is essential. It's hard, but it's essential.
Yeah.
I mean, and you've seen this in your life. Like, where have you seen it in your life where you're like, oh, if I had gone through this by my own myself.
Oh my gosh. Like just dating in its own is tough. And then getting married, the whole proposal. Married, having friends who are also married tell me, hey, like you're being an idiot right now. And like, in my life, it helps me with my wife not to have so many, I guess, silly arguments that blow up to bigger things that we can address it early on. So that's just one example. I'm sure that there's other examples that I can think of, but that's one super easy example as a newlywed.
Yeah.
Having other married friends like yourself, you and Tara, just giving a little advice, tips and tricks here. It's really helpful. So yeah.
No, I think, community is essential. And that's like another part of where I want this podcast to go is I don't want it to be just a podcast. As you'll see, I have stuff on multiple platforms. So it's like we have Instagram, we have Twitter, we have YouTube. We're going to be on Apple Podcasts, Google Play Podcasts. Like the goal is to be in as many places as possible. Eventually, and this is like looking in the future, I'd like to have some live like interaction opportunities where we can like connect with people that listen to the podcast more. But I want this to start like, I want to grow a community of people that want to pursue this well-prepared life. That I want it to like be a place where people can like talk about the things that they're going through and the ideas. And it's like, it would be awesome for that to develop where it's like pockets of community where you are. Because here's what I will say is this is something at our church that I really believe is online community is not real community.
Yeah.
You can have like good research and you can have some encouragement and some challenge from those people. But the people who know you the best are the people who live life with you.
The IRL friends.
The IRL. That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
It's like in real life. Those are the people who can be the most encouragement and the people who you can actually lean on the most.
Yeah.
Because the reality is if you know somebody online that lives thousands of miles away and you have like your car breaks down, that's not the person you're calling.
Right. Oh yeah. And like you have a problem with it, like you need a babysitter or you need someone to help you out, like just talk things out.
Yeah.
Going through a tough time.
So I want this to be a community. And one of the things I want it to do is kind of just challenge each other to what does it look like to live life on purpose. That's a personal motto of mine. I've thought about like making a house sign, like live, laugh, love, but live life on purpose.
Nice.
And have that in my home just as a reminder that I'm like, everything I do, I want to do for a reason. And I don't want to just take life for granted and let things happen to me. I want to pursue life on purpose.
Nice. Yeah, that's one area in my life that I'm very much interested in learning more from you on that. And just like learn from each other, just kind of figuring things out. Because I feel like I let life happen to me a lot just recently, just thinking about the calendar. It's like saying yes to this, not saying no, not making plans. So yeah, I'm excited for that. Excited for this journey.
Yeah. So we're briefly, and there's some topics that we're going to talk about. We're going to try to spend very little time on them. So we're not going to go in any depth on them. We're just going to give like, here's the idea, and then maybe a like 1 to 2 sentence description of them, of things that we want to touch on in this podcast as we go forward. And this is going to expand beyond this. But it's kind of the things that like the characteristics and character traits of the person that makes up the well-prepared life, who lives it. And so the first one, if Kyle, you can talk about this, is the idea of personal responsibility. Kind of what is personal responsibility in a brief description?
Personal responsibility. I think that's just is if you ever seen Jocko Willink, Extreme Ownership, I think that sums it up pretty well. Like taking ownership for your actions, who you are is who you are designing yourself to be, kind of thing. You're not, you're not subject to any other. Well, I guess you could be subject to influences, but you choose which influences to allow influence you.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like things will influence you. We are all influenced by things.
Right.
But we choose the right influences.
Yeah.
We don't allow things that are bad to influence us.
Right.
Or if they do, we recognize it and we make a change.
Yeah. Because it's okay to falter. Like you said, we falter, we struggle.
Yeah. One of the things I do want to make clear about the well-prepared life, it's not the perfect life.
Right.
Nobody lives the perfect life.
Right.
And so this is one of the things I think with personal responsibility is accepting blame. So when you mess up and make a mistake, that you recognize that and you make a change.
Yeah.
It is such a common thing where people just go down one track and they say, nope, I got to be right, because if I'm wrong, then nobody will trust me. And that's just not the case. Actually, I find that when you admit that you're wrong, that builds trust.
Yeah. I'd agree with that.
Bam. Yeah. Another area is self-governance. Briefly describe that, and then I have a quote I want to read that kind of goes through that a little bit.
Self-governance. So is that, would you say that that's like when you can't, when you are I guess kind of similar to personal responsibility, but you are making the rules for your own like self.
Yeah.
Your own
you're making your own rules.
Yeah.
Now, okay, we got to be careful with that.
Right. Not anarchy.
So we're making our own rules. It's less of that and more so of like what causes us to obey laws.
Yeah. Okay.
So like as far as like if I was asked that, what causes us to obey the law?
I mean, a lot of people speed. So that's
true.
one law that's not a lot of people abide by.
Yeah. So are we governing ourselves? But put it this way, the police officers are not causing, and there's cute, like a definition thing here. Police officers don't cause us not to speed.
Right. Okay.
We cause ourselves to speed or not to speed.
Yeah.
And we let the police officer when they're sitting on the side of the road with their camera, influence us to not speak.
Yeah, I do not want the repercussions of this decision.
And so self-governance, I love this quote. This is from Robert Winthrop at the 100-year anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And he talks about this. He says, and this is going to be a little bit of Old English, not too bad. He's thankfully pretty easy to understand. But he says this: I could not omit to urge on every man to remember that self-government politically can only be successful if it be accompanied by self-government personally. That there must be government somewhere, and that if the people are indeed to be sovereigns, they must exercise their sovereignty over themselves individually, as well as themselves in the aggregate, regulating their own lives, resisting their own temptations, and subduing their own passions, and voluntarily imposing upon themselves some measure of that restraint and discipline which, under other systems, is supplied from the armories of arbitrary power. The discipline of virtue in place of the discipline of slavery. There's another quote that I can't remember who exactly said it, but the simplification of the statement would be, if you're not able to control yourself, you will be controlled.
Okay.
And so we want to control ourselves. We want to make the decisions as people who live the well-prepared life to govern ourselves.
Nice.
One of the words for that, as far as like the ungoverned life, is the idea of licentiousness.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's pursuing every desire. There's a worldview called hedonism, where it's like I want to feel good right now.
Yeah, all the joys.
It's letting feelings lead in all of those decisions.
Okay.
And so the idea of self-governance is that we don't want to allow our feelings to dictate what we do, but we decide that like we're going to govern ourselves. We're going to live in a moral and upright way.
Right.
Okay. One that I think if you can just describe this one is the idea of ownership.
Ownership.
Like, what is ownership?
So not being in debt or I guess enslaved, kind of along the same vein of to anybody else. Owning land, owning your own self, owning your own like cars, having cars paid off. I think that's probably the big thing of ownership. And again, in the same vein, in the personality aspect of like owning your habits, owning your failures, kind of thing like that.
Yeah, I love what you said, owning your failures.
Yeah.
Like where it's like you don't pass on like your failures to somebody else. When you mess up, you recognize I messed up.
Yeah.
That's huge.
That's good.
A couple of other areas that we have are the idea of like spiritual and mental preparedness. And I have this story, let me find it real quick, of a friend, somebody very close to me, who went through one of the hardest life situations that I can imagine. So she got married when she was 21 years old. Her and her husband at the time had been dating for a few months. Actually, they'd been dating for like a couple years, got engaged for a few months. But after they'd been married for less than 6 months, he died of a car accident. And like her world naturally fell apart. And that's okay. So this is one of the things I just want to keep coming back to is well-prepared life does not mean that you're perfect and that you handle everything, that you're like, nobody would ever know that nothing is wrong in your life.
Right.
So it's like, so her world fell apart. Everything she expected of life was taken away. She was shaken and she was not okay, and that was okay, that she was not okay. But the one thing I would say, and this is kind of going back to that whole idea of like falling apart, is she didn't deteriorate in the midst of this. She had a spiritual family around her through her school and church community, and she was able to work through that grief. And now years later, after this, that's about 2 years ago now, she was in the midst of that wanting to encourage others.
Wow.
She leaned on God and she leaned on the people around her. And now she's leaning into life and where she's like wanting to look into what does it look like to use therapy, like trauma therapy to help other people because of the trauma that she's been through.
Man, that's beautiful.
And so that's a good example, I think, of somebody like that is resiliency. And that's mental and spiritual preparedness to when life throws the hardest things at you of losing the person that you were married to, that you want to spend the rest of your life with, that you can still go on to like contribute to the world around you and be an influence and make a difference to those that are around you. So that's like the best example that I personally know of somebody like really living out that mental and spiritual preparedness.
Yeah.
But yeah. So kind of to finish this up, there are some other areas of preparedness. Like I mentioned briefly, that prepper idea. And I say that jokingly because some people do caricaturize it. And they make a caricature of it and make a big deal. If you've ever seen the TV show Doomsday Preppers, they love making fun of people that want to prepare for the worst scenario.
Right.
And my kind of comeback to that would be, what natural disasters have happened in your area? And that there is a place for physical preparedness, even like FEMA, I think it's FEMA, with the emergency preparedness, recommends that everybody has like up to 2 weeks of food and water in their home. In case of some type of disaster, power outage, where they don't have access to clean water, they don't have access to food.
So that increased. It was 3 for
It used to be 3 days for a long time, but in the last few years, probably the last 5 to 10 years, it's increased to like you should have 2 weeks. Now that's not that hard to do. That's like probably about like 140 gallons of water, which sounds like a lot, but it's not actually that bad. Like to put it this way, you have typically a house with a tank water heater is about 40 gallons, 50 gallons of water in that heater.
Okay.
So like that's clean water there. And there's ways that you can access it.
Yeah.
So that's like, there's some physical preparedness. And here's what I would say with that too, is like everybody's like, it's a good practice to have an emergency fund. Like that's like financial wisdom. Have an emergency fund. 3 to 6 months is the magic number that people say you should have. What if you were to have 3 to 6 months worth of food? Like you could survive if you lost your job. So my thought is, in the same way that we want to be financially prepared, we should seek to be physically prepared. And that's hard to do at the same time. It's expensive. It's not easy. And I want to try to make this feel like a natural thing. It's not like I'm hoarding.
Right.
I'm like my perspective on this is that as I do try to like keep up some food for my family, that if people need help, I want to be able to help them.
It's like a health kit.
Yeah.
You don't have a bunch of Band-Aids all over the place. You just have one box where there's the health emergency. Hope you never have to use it. So you're saying like this is like kind of like that of your stash of emergency preparedness. You're not hoarding a bunch of stuff all over the house. You just got a box. Here it is. This is what I need to live on 2 weeks, something like that. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, 2 weeks of food doesn't take up much space.
Yeah.
But yeah. The last kind of area is the idea of like physical well-being. There's a YouTuber, and I won't say exactly what he said, but he basically said it this way, that if you're not fit and like a crisis happens around you, you're going to die.
Yeah.
And that's an extreme, very blunt statement. He's trying to make a point, so you take everything with a grain of salt. But there is a reality that you live longer when you're healthy.
Yeah.
Like that's just like common sense, something that a lot of statistics and studies have proven is that people who are healthy live longer.
Right.
And so what that means is taking care of yourself, eating well, exercising. We're going to talk more about some ideas from that. I would say I'm not the most out of shape guy, but I also would not at all call myself fit or in shape right now. And that's something I'm working on. And hopefully as you progress, you might see some change in that.
Nice. Yeah. That's the goal.
Yeah. But yeah, so as we wrap up, the kind of question that I want to ask as we kind of jump into this is there's this idea of you do the things that you want to do. And so if you're on the fence about this idea of like living this well-prepared life, my big question for you is, what do you want? Like, what do you want from your life? What do you want your life to look like?
Yeah.
And what is that? And like taking some time to really think through, like, what do I want?
Yeah. Who do you want to be?
Yeah, who do you want to be?
What kind of man do you want to be? What kind of woman do you want to be?
And so, this is purposely broad.
Yeah.
Because it's the idea of like, what do you want in your life, your relationships, for yourself, what do you want to do? If you have the time, go all in on like some of the facets of this question. Take some time, journal, think about it. And because that's what we're going to talk about in the next podcast is like, what does it mean to want something and to go after something?
Nice.
But yeah, any last thoughts?
No, I think it's good. Yeah, I'm ready for the journey.
Awesome. Well, thanks. Well, again, thank you for watching or listening to however you're consuming this podcast. But we're glad that you're joining us on the journey to the well-prepared life.